Alright, so let's move on to the foot then. I'll just make a bit more space in the viewport. And we'll start by going into edit mode on this lower leg, just so we can select this bottom loop of edges. So number 2, go into edge mode, Alt, click on this edge, and that's selected that one. Shift S, cursor to selected, we'll put the 3D cursor exactly in the middle. And then we'll come back out of edit mode, Shift A, mesh, we'll add a plane. So this plane is going to be the sole of the shoe. So let's move it down a bit. Let's go into side view, orthographic, and then get it to about the height that I want the shoe to be. So that's pretty close actually. And I'll bring that across on the y-axis to about here, and then into edit mode, number 1. I'm going to drag this on the y-axis forward, and you'll notice we've not selected the one behind it. So we'll undo that, and we need to make sure we go into toggle X-ray mode, and then whatever I select will automatically select what's behind it as well. So this time GY, and you can see it moves both of the vertices that are visible to us and the ones behind it. So probably about there. And let's come out of orthographic view, and I'll scale these in now. So this edge and this edge, SX, bring them in like that. Into edge mode, Control R, we'll put an edge in the middle and drag it across a little bit to about there. Number 3, and we'll bring this up. Then GY to bring it forward a bit so it lines up more with the bottom of the leg. Maybe take it down a little bit. Then Control R, we'll put another one here, and then we'll bring that, if we go into side view, we'll bring that in a little bit. We'll have one more at the beginning. And we'll bring this one down, and I want to snap this one so that it aligns perfectly with the bottom vertex here, so that they're both on the floor basically. So bring this down, and if I press Control, it will snap, but it will only snap to increments on the grid. So I need to change that behavior so that it will snap to something else. And we can do that by going into the Snap to settings at the top there, and just change this from increment to vertex. And now if I do the same, GZ, hold Control, it will snap to whatever vertex I put the mouse over. So I want it to be on this one. Then we've got this shape. So what I'd like to do now is make a heel. So I'm going to, number 3, choose this face. In fact, let's put one more edge over here, bring it to about there. Number 3, grab this face, and I'm going to extrude it downward. And again, I'm going to hold Control so that it snaps to the this point here. And in actual fact, I'm going to move it up just a little bit. And I'm going to extrude it again, and then I'll snap that to there instead. And then number 3, I've still got it selected, Control plus, and now I'm going to scale this. I'm going to press Shift Z so that it only scales on the X and Y. Shift Z will lock it on the Z axis. So let's bring that into about there, and Control R again. I'm going to scale that one in as well. Maybe bring it up a little bit. I'll probably bring this one, this edge, backwards, so GY. And I want to select the border, so Alt click around there. Let's just move it, make sure I've got it all. I have. And I'll do Alt E, extrude edges, and block it to the Z axis. And then number 2, I'm going to set this edge here at the front, F, 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 and that will fill them all in for me. I'll do F, F again. If I turn toggle X-ray off, we can now see the sort of shoe we've got. So I'd like it to be a bit more pointy at the end here. So back into edit mode, number 3, select this front face. I'm going to scale this on the X axis. Lock the Z. About there. And I think we'll bring that top edge down just a little bit. So I press G twice, and now I can slide. And if I press Alt now, or in Blender 4.1 upwards, it's now the C key because the Alt key is used to be able to rotate the viewport during a operation like this. I can slide and go beyond the original length and lock it to the edge that I want to slide along. So about there. And this one I'm going to bring it forward a bit. maybe widen these two out. SX, bring it a little bit, pull it to about there. And I think I'm going to bring this entire heel area back. So Z, toggle X-ray to make sure I select all the way through, and then GY, let's try that. Probably that looks a bit better. I'll just pull some of these edges and vertices around just so it looks a bit more like a shoe. I'm going to bevel this edge, Control B, just so we got a bit of sharpness there. And then all the way up, Control R, I'm going to add a few more to about there. Control B, bevel those out. And then just for a bit of interest, Alt E and extrude along the face normals and bring those either in or out, whichever you prefer. I'll probably go with out to about there. Let's just see what happens if I add a subdivision modifier to this. Control 2. Not quite what I'm after, but we'll fix this up. So let's turn the subdivision modifier back off. Back into edit mode. So I want these to be a bit sharper. So I'm going to alt click in fact, and then select loops, and then select edge rings. This will select all the way up the model, but I don't want it to go quite this high. So back into X-ray mode, B to box select, and then middle mouse button held down. I'll deselect those. Let's just make sure we've only got the bit that I want, which is the bottom part. I don't really want this part here, so I'll deselect that. And now I can bevel these, Control B, just to make sure that they don't get smooth or over smooth. So maybe it's about here. And now I'm going to do the subdivision. You'll see we're getting this sort of an effect. Let's do that for different areas as well. So the top, we'll select the two top faces and then inset those so that sharpens it up at the top with the subdivision modifier. I'd also like to add a sole onto this shoe, so Control R. I'm going to slide that down just so it flattens the bottom out a little bit. And then I want to flatten out the front end of the shoe a little bit, so I'll select this loop edge and then I'll just bevel it slightly. And that should flatten that down quite nicely. I'm going to select this entire edge, this edge loop that goes all the way around, and then I'll give that a bit of a bevel, just so it doesn't get smoothed out. And then generally just move the rest of the shoe around until we get a nice looking shape. Make sure you use orthographic so that you're only moving the shoe forward or backwards or left and right. And I'll remove the top faces so that we get a hole for the foot to slide into. And we'll come out of edit mode and turn on Shade Auto Smooth, or in Blender 4 add the Smooth by Angle modifier. And we'll try turning on the subdivisions a bit more. And we'll go back into edit mode, and then we'll add a few more loop cuts around the length of the shoe just so we can curve it a little bit more. And then we'll just improve this area where we've got the hole so it's not quite so sharp. And we'll go into isolation mode so we can see just the shoe. And you'll notice there's a little bit of pinching still at the front of this hole. So to get rid of that, we'll just select the vertices on the edge that are too close together. So this one and this one. And if we slide this one backwards, this should resolve that issue a little bit for us. And make sure we also select the ones at the bottom of that loop. That one and that one, slide those back. And if we're still getting a bit of visible shading artifacts like we are here on the corner, then we can just go into the smoothing options in the data panel and just increase the angle for the auto smooth. And that will solve that. Now again, in Blender 4, this is going to be a little bit different because we no longer have the normal option in here, so we can't modify the angle. What we do instead, just to recap, is go into the modifiers and we'll add a normal smooth by angle. Right click, shade smooth, and then we can modify the angle here. So if I just zoom in a little bit, I change this to 180 degrees, you can see we're now getting smoothing across it. So it's exactly the same as it was before in the data panel, it's just moved into a modifier. Now I'd like to add a little bit more geometry to the length of the shoe, and we'll do that by adding more edge loops using the bevel tool. So select all of these edges and then we'll bevel those, but we'll bevel using a percentage instead of an offset. So if we go into the bevel tool, and we'll change this to percentage, and we'll set it to 25%, and then we'll change the number of segments to 1. And that's the similar behavior to a subdivision, making sure that all of the loops are evenly distributed. And let's increase the thickness of the sole with one more edge loop, so Ctrl R, and just drag that into place. I'm going to press E, so that it aligns with either side, the bottom side. So let me show you what this is doing. If I press G now twice and slide, I can press the E, and it will align to either what's at the bottom or the surrounding loops. Or if I press F, I can flip it, and it will align to what's at the top instead. You see, this is the top, that's the bottom. So I need it at the bottom. I think it's about here, I think. And then I'm going to cut some holes in the shoe just by selecting the faces that go around the shoe and removing those. So that looks pretty good, but you'll notice the top line of the shoe is quite sharp now in this area here. So we need to fix that by grabbing the inner section and just pulling it upwards a little bit so that it rounds it out. Now, one thing obviously that is missing is that with the shoe, both the left and the right are slightly differently shaped. So I'll just create a bit of a unique right foot shape for this shoe using proportional editing. And then we'll come out of isolation mode so that we can get the proportions right by scaling it and positioning it with the rest of the model. Not forgetting to apply the scale as well. So before we wrap this video up, I just want to change the scale of this and make it stand on the world origin. At the moment it's through the floor. So let's unhide the lips that we've got hidden. We'll select everything. I'll go into orthographic view. I want to move it up now so that it sits, so its feet are at world 0. And then I want to move the 3D cursor to the world center by Shift C. And then I want to change the pivot point to be the 3D cursor as well, so that when I scale, it will scale based around that 3D cursor. So somewhere about there is about 1.6 meters in height, maybe a little bit smaller. And then I do Ctrl A to apply the scale. And at the moment, if I go into front view, you'll see it's facing backwards. So let's go into top view. I'm going to do RZ 180 to turn it around. And then anything that's got the solidify modifier, we're going to need to change the thickness to something smaller, 0.003 should do it. So that was on the body and the hips. 0.003, and then also on the head as well. So into the solidify, and we'll change this to 0.01, something like that, just so that this area here is snug up to the inside. And I also want to just go into edit mode on this one. Let's turn the solidify off for a second. Number 3 to go into face mode. And I want to give us a bit more space to rotate the pupil so that it won't immediately be covered by the outer part of this head. So I'm just going to select a few edge rings, this one, and maybe one more, that one. XF, and then back out of edit mode. And we'll turn the solidify back on. That's looking pretty good. In the next video, we'll start building the skeleton, ready for getting it nicely rigged so it can breathe some life into it.